Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 5:07 and it's Friday in your nation's capital. We made it through another week here and we're creeping into the holiday season. We're excited about that and we're excited about the next 4 hours. Coming up at 6:05, we're going to speak with Omer Butt running for that 32nd State Senate District. The Firehouse primary is tomorrow, so we're trying to get you as many of those candidates as we can. 6:35, Ben Wolfgang, national security correspondent, about UFOs.
Oh.
UFOs. There's a whole thing about UFOs.
Truth is out there.
Yes. 7:05, Dr. Robert Malone will give us his opinion on RFK Jr. as the new Secretary of Health and Human Services. 7:35, Trevor Maddich on last night's heartbreaking loss by the Commanders up in Philly. But we'll see him again later in the season. 8:05, Jenny Terre, New York Post, on how things are looking with ICE now that we've got a new sheriff in town, several new sheriffs covering our immigration and border policies. I am Larry O'Connor, and yes, she's back for another bite at the apple. Patrice Onwuka. Good morning, Patrice.
Good morning. Happy Friday, everybody. We made it.
Indeed. You know, sometimes, you wake up early in the morning, as we do, Patrice,
yes,
and you have a little bit of a headache.
Oh, yeah.
And I have found, I try not to eat in the morning. I do, I just
fast.
I do some fasting in the morning, exactly. But sometimes when I have a headache, I have a little snack, that helps me out. A little blood sugar situation.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Had myself a little jalapeno Cheetos.
What?
Yeah, jalapeno Cheetos, and I love the jalapeno Cheetos. Those are good. They're better than like the Red Hot Cheetos. You don't want those because those will turn your insides red. So I do the jalapeno Cheetos, and then I do a little bit of a peanut M&M, just the offset of the sweet and salt.
I can see the two of those. I can see them balance.
Helps my headache. So I did that this morning while it's still legal. Because
where are they going? Where are
the new
going?
Secretary of Health and Human Service. Every time I eat anything that could be construed as junk food, I have this image of RFK Jr. staring me down with that
That's an ominous look,
cool-eyed look, saying you know you shouldn't be eating that.
Worse if he's not wearing a shirt and you see how ripped he is, and it's a reminder of why he wants us to eat well.
Yeah, you know what? By the way, I want him to undergo performance-enhancing drug testing. If he's going to be the Secretary of Health and Human Services, I think he's on the juice. There's no way at 71 he's looking like that.
If he eats well and he exercises regularly,
and if he takes testosterone, come on. No, there's something anyway. That being said, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is your new Secretary of Health and Human Services.
Yes.
It is surprising to me that he's constantly being identified. We noticed this when we heard the news report on this, that he's not just RFK Jr. He's not, environmental activist RFK Jr. He's not, lawyer RFK Jr., son of the Robert Kennedy, legendary.
Yes.
We named a football stadium in town after
civil rights activist. Yes.
No, he's none of those things. He's just vaccine skeptic, RFK Jr.
Or anti-vaxxer.
Right. And
almost every headline is reporting it that way. I hate hearing that.
It's one of the things we hate about the news is that they just reduce an individual down to a label, which, by the way, is not really accurate. And let me just go on the record because I've been dealing with controversial vaccine questions for the last 18 years of my life. Well, or 16 years of my life. And I know the number because my son is almost 18.
Yes.
And he is on the autism spectrum.
Yes.
And when he was a little over 2 years old, he was diagnosed. And when you become part of the autism community, you get inundated with people who are just hell-bent, proof positive, sure that the vaccines cause it. All right. And I'm not one of those people. I just want everyone to know. I don't think there is a link it hasn't been proven that there's a link between these vaccines and autism. So I'm not, anti-vaccine. I just want to make sure everyone realizes that. That said, I have tracked RFK Jr.'s career. I have tracked what he's been doing and saying about it. He is not anti-vaccine, and he's not a vaccine skeptic. What he is highly skeptical of the approval process for these vaccines.
Okay.
And the fact of the matter is the vast, vast majority of childhood vaccinations do not go through the rigorous drug testing protocols that anything else on the market goes through.
Yeah.
And all of the pharmaceutical companies are immune from any legal action should there be any damages as a result of those vaccines. Now, you may argue that that's good government policy.
Yeah.
But I don't remember having that public debate. Do you?
No.
The FDA just decided this is good public policy, so this is what we're going to do. Well, so RFK Jr. is not a skeptic of vaccines. He's a skeptic of the regulatory process that has allowed vaccines to go pretty much untested and unproven and immune. And I think we just saw that play out with COVID.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
if all of the so-called experts who have been the wisest people in the room for the last several years, running HHS, running the CDC, running the FDA, if they had credibility with us, we'd be right on board saying, yeah, we don't need an RFK Jr. But they spent all of that goodwill.
They did.
They spent it by bullying, by intimidating, by gaslighting, by lying, and even attempted censorship to quiet anybody who dared to stand up. And so you act that way when you're in a position of authority. That's how you get RFK Jr. as the new boss. That's
right. The other thing that we hear about RFK Jr., the other criticism is that he heading up HHS is that he's not a doctor. He's a lawyer.
Yeah.
Now, it's hilarious because I think most people don't know who is the current secretary of HHS, Javier Becerra, former attorney general, i.e. lawyer, of California.
Right.
He sued people for a living, and maybe he sued a couple of pharma companies. I don't know, but I know he sued a lot of nonprofit groups to try to force them to release their donor lists. He has been a part of the Kamala Harris type wing of the world, those prosecutors who really are going after kind of the wrong, bad folks. But so currently we have a lawyer in charge of HHS, and then the assistant secretary is Rachel Levine, who is, I guess, a medical doctor, has built her this person's career.
Watch your pronouns, Onwuka.
On pediatrics, I would think probably counseling a lot of kids to question their sex. That is probably
that's Rachel Levine's stated policy with the Department of Health and Human Services is to facilitate childhood transitions.
So I don't know, but I am more than happy to kick that lawyer out and to kick that child transitioning force out, and then to bring somebody else in who cares actually about ensuring that America is no longer leading in obesity. America is no longer, and hey, Michelle Obama claimed to be all about cutting obesity. She just made school lunches worse off. I mean, it's not even good. So I'm interested in someone who's going to be a disruptor. And we talked about this yesterday, Larry. It is about disrupting the current model. It is about disrupting the system and cutting out government waste and all of these ridiculous pet projects that are very much ideologically driven. And I'm looking forward to seeing what RFK Jr. can do.
I am too, and I want there to be an open debate about it. I think that's the biggest problem is that any questioning of the status quo in the science and agriculture community and food regulatory community over the past several years, any challenge or questioning of the policies and protocols and the way we go about doing business in those fields have been met with being shouted down, screamed down, name-called, and silenced.
Yes.
And I don't know, in America, whenever there are people saying, no, you can't have that opinion and we will remove you from polite society if you hold that opinion, frankly, that makes me actually more interested in that opinion that is not supposed to be heard. And now here we are. And for those who think that he's unqualified for such a position and this is outrageous, it was only 12 years ago when Barack Obama openly floated the idea of making Robert F. Kennedy Jr. the director of the EPA.
Interesting.
So if Obama thought he was worthy of a cabinet-level position, I don't see what argument you have against Trump thinking the same thing. It's going to be a fascinating process. And I think that people defending the status quo at the CDC and anybody who's been through COVID and the pandemic, who doesn't think there needs to be a thorough audit and a thorough examination of how those agencies work. I was asleep for the last 5 years, and we were not. We were wide awake. It's 5:15 WMAL traffic and weather. Kennedy said yesterday, I look forward to working with the more than 80,000 employees at HHS. 80,000 employees. To free the agencies from the smothering cloud of corporate capture so they can pursue their mission to make America once again the healthiest people on earth. Together, we'll clean up corruption, stop the revolving door between industry and government, and return our health agencies to their rich tradition of gold standard evidence-based science. I will provide Americans with transparency and access to all the data so they can make informed choices for themselves and their families. Well, I can see why he's controversial. We'll watch that confirmation process.
Oh, and by the way, yesterday,
keenly.
all of those pharma companies, their stocks tanked.
I saw that. That was remarkable,
They're
wasn't
scared.
it? Yeah. That said, honestly, the jalapeno Cheetos are so good. We've got them in the vending machine. You want to try some during the? You seem
no,
really. They're
I love
so
Cheetos,
good.
but I will skip the
Cheetos.
jalapeno.
Oh no, it's so good. All right.
I want to be on the right side of the HHS secretary. So.
Also announced yesterday, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum has been announced as Secretary of the Interior, which is interesting. Now, most people assume that he was going to be energy.
Yes.
Interior obviously is going to touch on land use issues, which will also involve drilling, fracking, and leases like that. But it's a little more all-encompassing in terms of federal lands, use of lands, obviously. National parks, et cetera, et cetera. It's an important and powerful position. What I find most notable about this is that towards the end of the first Trump administration, there was a very aggressive move to relocate the Department of Interior out west, where it's really
I heard about that.
much more relevant, I think.
Yeah.
People out on this side of the Mississippi, or even on this side of the Appalachians don't understand how much of the land out west is owned by the federal government. The state of Nevada, it's something like 80% of the land in the state of Nevada is federal land. It's outrageous. It's actually insane how much land the federal government controls out west. And as long as the Department of Interior oversees all of that, why should they be located, in downtown Washington, D.C.?
That's right, so far removed.
I think they're by Foggy Bottom, if I remember right, or in Foggy Bottom neighborhood. Why not move that agency? We don't live in, when Washington was first created and all these agencies were sort of dreamt up. We live in a time now where it's very easy to travel this country. Everywhere is accessible via airplane, obviously. And we're a vast nation. Why not move Interior out there? And coming from North Dakota, maybe Burgum, when he begins now, will start that process to move that agency and others outside.
And you know
Washington.
what could be important? Instead of getting all these D.C. policy folks who've never touched one foot in the on federal land,
That's right.
Maybe you get people who are actually on the ground, who work closer and understand the on the ground realities in that area,
and are more easily accessible
That's
to
right.
the citizens who are living and
yes.
are actually affected by it. Trump yesterday at Mar-a-Lago at a big event for America First policy made the announcement sort of off the cuff.
So everybody's waiting. There he is. Hi, Doug. He's going to be announced tomorrow, and we have somebody else that's probably coming up with him to be announced, who's a big one. And we're going to do things with energy and with land, Interior, that is going to be incredible. And so I look forward to doing the formal announcement. Although this is a pretty big announcement right now.
Yeah, in fact, it's announced by doing that, Mr. Trump. That's how it works. The land use is going to be the big thing here, and certainly as it pertains to drilling and oil and gas exploration, and that's a very big deal. By the way, one other item of note, Doug Burgum looks just like George Washington.
I am seeing the side by side.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Larry Kudlow had Burgum on earlier in the campaign season, asked about that.
So everybody's waiting. There he is.
That's Donald Trump again.
And China's opening up a coal plant every 2 weeks to help them win the AI arms race.
How about some Friday follies, Governor? Katie Pavlich, you just met her?
Yes.
She's smart. She says you look like George Washington. You look just like George Washington. Focus in on him. I don't know if we have a handy picture of George Washington. She claimed Katie's a very smart woman. And my only question is, how long have you looked like George Washington?
Apparently about 10 seconds. This is news to me on that.
Right, follies. Governor Doug Burgum.
Thank you, Larry.
Dude, I've met a lot of the people down at Mount Vernon. It would be brilliant if they got Burgum to dress up like George Washington down there. Yeah, absolutely. I think it'd be fantastic for this year's July 4th.
He should go out to South Dakota when there's the big celebration on Mount Rushmore and do a reenactment.
That would be great, although he is a North Dakota guy, and I think that they feud. That border is very volatile.
Okay.
Also announced yesterday, new Secretary for Veterans Affairs is going to be Congressman Doug Collins of Georgia. In fact, you just did a TV hit with him yesterday on the Sean Spicer Show.
Yes, we were on yesterday, and he's great. What he talked a lot about when it comes to these and just the approach that a lot of these nominees are going to take. He's pragmatic. He said, I'm very pragmatic. I get that people want a purist, but you have to get things done. You have to govern. And it was refreshing to hear him speak. And then next thing I know, my phone starts blowing up on X. It's Sean Spicer's clip of us talking, and then it's and he's just been announced as the new veteran secretary. I'm like, wow. John Spicer pulls some real heavy hitters.
The
there.
congressman from Georgia, big Trump supporter, and really helped in the campaign in
Yes.
Georgia. He's also a reservist for the Air Force, also a chaplain, which I did not know that.
I did not know that.
And I got to say, I've met several chaplains over the last several years, and thinking of a chaplain as the secretary of the VA actually is a really harmonious mix because there's so much pastoral care that's given to our soldiers and our airmen and our sailors and our Marines by the chaplains. Chaplains are unsung heroes right now.
Yes.
Over the course of the last 20 years and what they've had to deal with and how stretched thin they are. And I think that knowing that, Doug Collins will bring incredible empathy to the job of Secretary of VA. So the Trump cabinet is shaping up, and I got to say, so far,
brilliant. It's exciting.
So pretty cool. It's 5:24.
Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 5:36. Thanks for letting us ride shotgun with you this morning as we round out a very busy week in your nation's capital and launch you into a nice autumn weekend. At 6:05, Omer Butt is going to join us running in that Republican primary to go to Richmond in this special election for the 32nd State Senate District. Also, 6:35, Ben Wolfgang, national security correspondent, talk about the questions about UFOs and some new hearings that are going to be had. 7:05, Dr. Robert Malone on RFK. 7:35, Trevor Maddich on the Commanders. And then 8:05, Jenny Terre, New York Post reporter, on the border. Not literally on. Well, she might be on the border for all we know. Larry O'Connor with Patrice Onwuka.
Happy Friday, everybody.
It is a happy one. And if you're a recent nominee to the Trump cabinet, well, you're facing obvious pushback and criticism from Democrats, the media, and as Chris Plant would say, I repeat myself. But if you're Matt Gaetz and Pete Hegseth and Tulsi Gabbard, you're getting, some more volatile criticism than anyone else. On Matt Gaetz, apparently the big question is whether he's qualified or not. Andrew McCabe, who had to get drummed out of the FBI in disgrace for his political hackery and apparently lying about leaking to the New York Times, Andrew McCabe says Matt Gaetz is not qualified for the job. We might want to turn this on. Thanks.
What are the implications of having Matt Gaetz as Attorney General?
Good morning, Casey. There are so many things that kind of jump out to you when you hear that the prospect of that nomination. But I think the first thing that really impresses me is what it says about Donald Trump's intention for the Justice Department and the FBI. Now, Matt Gaetz is obviously wholly unqualified for this job. He's someone who, quite frankly, couldn't get hired by the FBI if he was, had he ever been interested in that, which I'm sure he never was. Probably couldn't qualify for a clearance.
Interesting. How does he know that? I mean, the implication there is there are things in his background that wouldn't let him be qualified for the FBI or clear a clearance check.
Yeah.
But how would Andrew McCabe know that?
Unless he's already dug into his background.
But how would he have done that unless that was common practice for an FBI assistant director to do on any member of Congress? See, this is part of the problem. The FBI famously leaked to the media that they were investigating Matt Gaetz for very tawdry allegations involving an underage woman. But then they dropped those charges. They had no evidence.
After several years.
But they're going ahead and laundering all of this stuff out there. Why? This is the reason why
slander people's names.
You need someone at
reputation.
the FBI right now. Exactly. I mean, by doing that, he's absolutely demonstrating exactly why people are frustrated and angry at the use of the FBI and the Justice Department for illicit political means instead of actually prosecuting law. Listen, if Matt Gaetz is guilty of a crime, bring some charges against him. Otherwise, shut your mouth.
Exactly.
He's an American citizen.
And frankly,
and you don't drag them
apologize.
through. Yes, thank you. Andrew Weissman, who is also, by the way, a disgraced former Justice Department official, was on MSNBC doing the same thing.
It's really this idea of that somehow Matt Gaetz is going to be the person who prevents and stops weaponization when he is the exhibit A to weaponization. I mean, we are in pure George Orwell 1984 land.
This is Andrew Weissman accusing the Trump administration, incoming, of weaponizing the Justice Department. Andrew Weissman utilized the Justice Department to go after Enron, prosecuted them to the fullest extent of the law, and that entire case was thrown out by the Supreme Court. Andrew Weissman is the poster child of weaponizing the Justice Department. He was also the chief deputy on Robert Mueller's witch hunt against the Trump administration over Russian collusion, which never existed existed.
Yes.
And Andrew Weissman, of course, fails upwards and now is the legal correspondent on MSNBC.
And for him to talk about the George Orwellian world, I mean, that side of the aisle, come on now.
Elizabeth Warren.
Do understand with Matt Gaetz, and you've already made this point, he's not the only one out there who is unqualified and who raises whole questions like Tulsi Gabbard does. You really want her to have all of the secrets of the United States and our defense intelligence agencies when she has so clearly been in Putin's pocket? That just has to be a hard no.
Well, here's a sitting senator saying that Tulsi Gabbard, a Democrat, until very recently, former congresswoman and an Army reservist, an officer in the United States Army, is in Putin's pocket. That seems rather irresponsible, doesn't it? And again, if you have evidence of such things,
let's see it.
Let's see it and let's bring charges. But instead, this is the politics of personal discussion by just throwing it out there, and it's despicable, and it's the reason why people want someone like Tulsi Gabbard to be DNI.
That's exactly right. Listen, I mean, Elizabeth Warren, what has she done before she was elected to Senate from Massachusetts? All she did, she worked at Harvard. I get it. She was a lawyer, and she lectured at Harvard and a couple of other schools. But people could say, if she was ever nominated to a cabinet position in the Biden and Harris administration, what would her qualifications be? I mean, let's stop it here, because now I think we recognize the lens that President Trump is working through is disruption. People who are going to cut, disrupt, and weed out corruption. So there you go.
Well, yeah, and this whole argument of qualifications, not qualified. So our buddy Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, apparently yesterday, he had a folded up picture of Rachel Levine, the aforementioned gender confused Undersecretary of Health and Human Services who cross-dresses every day, and Sam Britton, the also the cross-dresser. All
Same
the cross-dressers
thing.
hired.
Except he's a kleptomaniac.
This is the bald dude who had nuclear secrets of the Department of Energy and then stole women's luggage, right? He had a picture of the two of them in his pocket, and whenever a reporter asked about Matt Gaetz or Tulsi Gabbard or anything, or are they qualified, he pulled out the picture of those two and say, I wonder, did you dog Democrats all day and ask them about these appointments?
That's epic.
Yeah. But all of this doesn't hold a candle to what they're trying to do to Pete Hegseth. They're going one step further and calling him a Nazi. And we'll share that with you in just a moment. It's 5:43.
Later this morning on the Chris Plant Show, Democrats cannot imagine where Elon Musk would cut money from, not even transgender monkey projects. 9 a.m. on WMAL.
Add the Secretary of Defense nominee, Peter Hegseth, the Fox News commentator as well, because this is someone who, weekend host, important distinction. This is someone who, is known to be a white supremacist, known to be an extremist, whose platform, whose book is basically about his opposition to the advancement of black officers to the top brass.
So much to unpack there. Sherilyn Ifill, she's the civil rights chair at Howard University.
Yeah. Former head of the NAACP, by the way. On
MSNBC yesterday with Chris Hayes calling Pete Hegseth a, quote, known white supremacist. Of course, the Peacock NBC News brand is all over that defamation, as is host Chris Hayes, who just lets it go by without any challenge or pushback. I love the, she calls him a Fox News commentator, and Chris Hayes corrects her and says, weekend host. They're trying to diminish him by saying weekend host. Trust me, being a weekend host on Fox News is a pretty coveted job.
I'm pretty sure he's
media
pulling
circles.
More viewership than you are right now.
Than Chris Hayes is on prime time on a Monday through Friday slot. Yeah,
yes.
But a known white supremacist. That's something else to say about
some of these people
Pete Hegseth.
Need a lawsuit slapped against them for saying this stuff.
I would agree.
What evidence does she have that he is? But I don't think she needs it. All she has to use is the emotional race card. Play that card every time, and it's a way of just diminishing who he is.
Well, she can also say, hey, I just read it in the New York Times this morning, because lo and behold, the New York Times editorial board. So that means every person, the New York Times imprimatur is on this, not just an individual. The entire New York Times wrote, it's far from certain Mr. Hegseth could even obtain the security clearances required for his job. He said he was one of a dozen National Guard members removed from service at President Biden's inauguration in 2021. because of concerns that he was an extremist, possibly because of a tattoo he wears that is popular among white supremacists. So that's a fascinating little dance around the truth that the New York Times just engaged in. Here is Pete Hegseth telling that story in particular, and the tattoo in question. It's a visual. You can't see it. I'll describe it. It's known as a Jerusalem cross. It is an ancient Christian symbol that my friend David Marcus, who writes at Fox News editorial, he was many Christians, Catholics, Orthodox, when they are in the Holy Land the first time they visit, they often get this tattoo. It's kind of a tradition. And Father Mike Schmitz, who does the Bible in a Year podcast, he's a priest. He got a Jerusalem cross when he was in the Holy Land. I've considered getting a Jerusalem cross when I visit the Holy Land for the first time. It's a thing. Here's Pete Hegseth revealing that story.
I was deemed an extremist because of a tattoo by my National Guard unit in Washington, D.C. And my orders were revoked to guard the Biden inauguration. Jerusalem cross tattoo, which is just a Christian symbol.
Is that
this is the one.
Is that the tattoo?
Yep, right here. This one is what got me disinvited. I'd never had orders revoked before. I mean, listen.
All right, so that's Pete Hegseth revealing the story personally because it's so outrageous that the Pentagon would do that. And the New York Times takes that and says, see, he's a Nazi. Look at that. And then Eiffel takes it to MSNBC and starts repeating this slander. They are the worst human beings on the planet.
They're disgusting.
And it's exactly why Donald Trump won the election.
They're disgusting. And by the way, this woman is just a commentator herself. But, you know,
she's not even a weekend host.
She's not even a weekend host. Listen, any person who walks around with a cross, are they a Nazi? Are they a KKK Klans member? Right. Because I'm pretty sure the Klan members use the cross. But lots of people walk around with crosses. Why? Because it's the religious symbolism behind it. What they're doing is trying to mudsling against Pete Hegseth. This MSNBC audience, I guarantee you, they're not going to do research. They're not going to go to the New York Times article and actually read the description and realize for themselves, oh, this is just slanderous.
Right.
They're going to listen to this woman who's just using her 2 minutes of fame to try to slander this guy. But that's all they have. If they can't talk about his military service, if they can't question his military service the way we were able to say, well, Tim Walz, what's going on there? They don't have that. They don't even talk about his time leading two veterans organizations. So it tells me they're desperate to try to find something else, and they're leaning into the emotional play of being racist.
Well, calling us garbage Nazis really didn't work well in the last election.
That's
so
true.
Keep it up, guys. Also, get this one. Jake Tapper talking to Sanjay Gupta on CNN about Robert Kennedy.
This is somebody who has been, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has been pushing quackery, who has been pushing lies, who has been pushing conspiracy theories. You've been talking to experts in the health community, the medical community, preparing for him, RFK Jr., to be given some sort of role in health. What have they said to you?
Well, you know, it's not often that the entire medical and public health community is going to be in lockstep on something, but they're pretty close on this in terms of their significant concerns, horror even. Somebody said to me today, I can't think of any single individual who'd be more damaging to public health than RFK.
You know, first of all, I can think of some other things that they were lockstep about over the last several years
like
that
the
they
COVID
were pretty
vaccine.
damn wrong about. It's also not universal. In fact, Dr. Robert Malone is going to be joining us later in the program at 7:05 to give us his opinion. And he doesn't share the same opinion that Gupta has. By the way, what did Sanjay Gupta just say there? I can't think of any single individual who would be more damaging to public health than RFK. Who's saying that again?
Dr. Sanjay Gupta.
You know what, Dr. Gupta? I can think of someone who would be more damaging to public health than RFK.
I won't go there.
Sanjay. It's 5:53.